The whine of sirens tore through the still air on Willow Creek Road like we were suddenly the target of a SWAT operation. 3 sheriff's cruisers screeched to a stop right in front of my cabin at 927 Redwood Trace. Out stormed Celeste Harland, self-appointed queen of the Stonewater Bluffs HOA, arms flailing like she was orchestrating a felony takedown. She bellowed that I'd refused to comply with governance obligations. Deputy Mason squinted behind his aviators, clearly confused. He told her gently that declining to join an HOA discussion wasn't a criminal act. But Celeste wasn't finished. She leaned in close, gritting out that I was unwell, had installed a patio without architectural review, and made her feel extremely unsafe after I asked her, politely, I might add, to step off my porch. I stepped into view, casually leaning against the frame of my front door, and addressed the deputy. I told him to let my mom know I'd be late to dinner. Deputy Mason's expression changed like someone just flipped a switch. He paused. Wait, you're Nate Ralston's son. And just like that, what Celeste hoped would be a triumphant public takedown started unraveling. But before I get ahead of myself, let me rewind and tell you how I landed in this absurd standoff. My name's Jacob Ralston, 34 years old. A few months back, I inherited my uncle's cozy knotty pine cabin here in Stonewater Bluffs, tucked deep in the Ozark foothills of northern Arkansas. I'm a self-employed contractor. All I wanted was to cast a line off my dock, grill up some ribs, and soak in the quiet charm of lake life. But Celeste Harland had other plans. This woman had ruled over our HOA for 9 straight years. She wore pastel suits like armor and had a clipboard surgically attached to her hand. Her personalized golf cart was named Civic Harmony, with custom decals and a rooftop orange safety light. When I declined her invite to attend a mandatory vision alignment brunch, citing this radical notion of free will, she apparently took it as open rebellion. That's when the trouble began. At first, it was what she described as neighborly reminders. She claimed my mailbox was non-conforming, though it had stood there undisturbed since the Reagan administration. My gravel drive was labeled aesthetic discord, and once, no joke, she wrote that my yard had an aggressive foliage stance, whatever that meant. Then came the surveillance. Celeste began walking her tiny gray Pekingese named Serenity Protocol past my place 6 times a day. She took pictures of everything, garden gnome, solar lights, even a squirrel feeder nailed to the oak tree out back. One afternoon, she filed an official complaint that my decorative rain chain produced unauthorized musical tones. One evening, I spotted her tiptoeing into my side yard wielding a custom HOA branded tape measure. The thing had a printed slogan, no rule, no peace. She was measuring the height of my retaining wall. I stepped out and asked her, civilly but firmly, to leave. That same night, I received a certified letter accusing me of being verbally hostile and emotionally weaponized. Things escalated when she sent me another demand, this time for a compulsory compliance picnic. I declined. Again, I had projects to finish, clients to serve, and frankly no time for Kool-Aid and HOA cult energy. That's when she snapped. Celeste called 911. She told dispatch I was erratic, confrontational, and posed an urgent threat to community welfare. What she forgot to mention was that Jacob Ralston is the only son of Nate Ralston, the county sheriff for the past 20 years. The response was enthusiastic. 3 patrol units arrived within minutes. The officers were ready for a crisis. Until they realized they'd been dragged into a hyperdramatic property dispute orchestrated by a woman who thinks lawn gnomes are subversive. Deputy Mason radioed in a code 901 inches, false alarm. He added, dryly, HOA drama queen abusing emergency lines. Celeste turned a ghostly shade of eggshell. She began stammering that she was the real victim here, her voice rising like a tea kettle. The sergeant on duty, Officer Green, raised one skeptical eyebrow. So, you called emergency services because he skipped your brunch. The silence was sharper than shattered glass. Our sheriff's department doesn't play when it comes to misuse of 911, especially when it's about lawn decor and especially when the accused is family. I calmly handed over the porch cam footage showing Celeste trespassing repeatedly, narrating conspiracies about chaotic exterior expression, and whispering threats to my garden bed. That same afternoon, she was formally cited for trespassing and making a false police report. The HOA board, which mostly consisted of retired teachers and ex-accountants just trying to enjoy lakefront sunsets, called an urgent vote. They immediately suspended Celeste's Executive Emergency Authority, which turned out to be a power she invented without approval. A polite mass email followed, reminding residents not to call 911 unless someone's actually dying or stealing copper wiring. That night, Dad called me, and I could hear the grin in his voice. He told me to proceed how I liked, just stay inside the lines of the law. I promised I would. Fast forward 3 weeks, the next HOA meeting was set at the community gazebo near the water. I'd never attended before, but this time, I came armed, with 2 bulging binders filled with reports, statutes, and HOA bylaws. The sun dipped low across the lake, painting the sky in fiery oranges. Celeste arrived wearing a sash that read, Architect of Order, in sequins, draped over her lemon-yellow blazer. When the meeting opened, she launched into her usual agenda, but I raised my hand and motioned to speak. With help from Deputy Mason, I'd compiled a tidy stack of violations, everything from illegal fund reallocations to bypassed election protocols. I showed proof that Celeste had issued fines without board approval, spent HOA funds on branded, compliance materials, and regularly violated both state and federal property statutes. The board members were stunned. One even gasped when I mentioned her attempt to purchase a drone using HOA dues. When I moved for a formal vote of no confidence, the motion was seconded instantly, twice. The count was brutal, 17-1 in favor of removal. The lone abstention, Celeste herself. She froze for a solid 30 seconds, her jaw clenched and eyes blazing. Then she stormed away, but slipped on a patch of damp moss near the lake. Her foot slid, her arms flailed, and with a perfectly timed sploosh, she fell backward into the water. Her sash floated away, spinning slowly in the lake like the flag of a fallen empire. Neighbors hurried toward her, but she was already on her feet in waist-high water, snarling like a wet cat tangled in weeds. I took a slow sip of my sweet tea and said loud enough for the crowd to hear, balance has finally been restored. Someone clapped, a few even laughed, but justice wasn't done yet. Her misuse of the emergency line had legal consequences. The county prosecutor, Dad's former college roommate, didn't appreciate anyone tying up emergency channels with nonsense. Especially not one involving the sheriff's family. Celeste Harland was charged with filing a false report and criminal trespass. At her hearing 2 months later, she showed up in a muted brown skirt suit, her clipboard noticeably absent. Judge Halliday didn't need long. After reviewing the camera footage, the official complaints, and hearing from officers Green and Mason, the judge found her guilty. Her sentence, 30 days in county lockup, suspended pending 18 months of probation, 150 hours of community service assisting domestic abuse shelters, and a $4,000 fine plus fees. With the cherry on top, Judge Halliday added a restriction. Celeste was prohibited from serving on any HOA board or community enforcement position for the entire duration of her probation. The gavel came down like thunder. She wobbled slightly as the judgment sank in. Her attorney tried to object, but Celeste simply sat down, defeated, her hands folded in her lap like a child in timeout. That was the last time she wore pastels to a courtroom.